Are you interested in learning more about GitOps and continuous delivery? Join the Continuous Delivery Foundation and the Cloud Native Computing Foundation for CDCon plus GitOpsCon, happening May 8th and 9th in Vancouver. The event will foster collaboration, discussion, and knowledge sharing by bringing communities to start shaping the future of GitOps and CD. We're excited to offer a special discount code for Cloudcast listeners. Simply use the code PODCAST10 for 10% off when you register. Act fast. That's PODCAST10 when you register for GitOpsCon and CDCon.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Aaron, it's a big show today. Not only that, you and I have actually, I think, gotten together more in person this year than we have in many, many, many years. Have you recovered from our night out the other night?
Oh man, that was so. Yes, I did, but that was rough. Definitely getting older and starting to feel it, I think, is definitely a theme for this year, though.
Yeah, so we may have to post some of those pictures publicly. It was a lot of fun. We had a chance to do some costume stuff and dress up for charity and raise a bunch of money. So that was all fun. But today's a big.
Let me tell my Devo hat story real quick.
Oh yeah, please do that.
So dress up for charity. I wore a Devo hat, which that alone, I have to probably post pictures. Multiple people wanted their picture with me, and one of them was a younger lady. And she said, "Oh my gosh, can I get a picture? Can I get a picture?" I said, "Yes, absolutely." And as we're getting the picture, she's like, "Yes, this will be so awesome. My dad has a Devo t-shirt and he's going to love this." I'm so old.
We are officially so old. Today's a big show, man. And I guess in that context of us being, being a little more on the mature side, this is we are now part of the 700 Club.
Yes.
Not that 700 Club, but the show is now part of the 700. This is our 700th show. Unbelievable.
Yeah. It is amazing to me. And we were talking about it, like how long the podcast has lasted and also the evolution and other things that have changed and morphed over the years. And we also have some stats that we were going to talk about, some other 700s. But then when we put the list together, we're like, oh gosh, I don't know if this list makes us look good or not.
Well, So I started doing a little bit of research. I was looking up like any sort of like interesting historical significance of the number 700 or whatever. So 700 for the math nerds out there is the sum of four consecutive prime numbers, 167, 173, 179 and 181. That means nothing to me, but it was on the top of the Wikipedia page, so that must be important. And then I got to thinking, I was like, well, 700, that's a big milestone. We've really achieved something. And then I went out and I was like, well, what are other big milestones that people care about? Both Ronaldo and Messi both scored more than 700 goals. So we are 827 and 795 respectively. So we're way behind them.
So we got to get to 800 shows.
We got to get to, because they probably won't play for that much longer, although maybe they will. Barry Bonds, who holds the home run record in U.S. baseball, 762. So we're behind him. The Simpsons have had 743 episodes, and Doctor Who has had 862 episodes. So we're still behind all of those amazing achievements and world-renowned things. So we're still pretty small in the big picture of things. But 700 still a thing. I'm proud of it. I think at one point I got to go back. We used to add up all the minutes that you could listen to the show, and I think you could listen. Oh man, it's like a week long. If you were really, really bored, you could listen to the show for like a week long, end to end, 24/7. So I'll go back and get that updated number. Maybe I'll do it at the midweek show, mid-year show or something.
And I would say this, challenge to the listeners out there. Is there anybody that has listened to all 700?
Yeah, I would love to know anybody who's listened since year one. Maybe, and I know our parents aren't even included in that. Our friends and family probably aren't included in that. But anybody who's listened for a really long time, let us know. Maybe we'll break out some old vintage T-shirts or something that we have laying around in the closet that we're welcome to send out. The other sort of milestone we have before we get to our guest, we are going to, since we're just talking about milestones, we're going to cross 12 million listens this month. So that is that's less of an achievement for you and I, and more of just a massive, massive thank you to everybody who listens to the show. 12 million times people have clicked play on the Cloudcast and heard whatever intro music we've had over the years. So big deal. There's only 6 states in the United States that have 12 million people. There's only 77 countries out of like 250 or 300 in the world that have 12 million people. So, we're at least as big as like Ohio, I guess. Maybe that's the way to think of it. We're like the Ohio of podcasts. So 12,700,000, kind of big numbers. Very proud of it. Very thankful for everybody who listens. Do you have a favorite show, Aaron? Do you have a favorite show or guest that we've been on, that you've hosted or we've been on together?
So still there's been just amazing talks, and I've learned so much from the guests over the years. I mean, that's been the biggest takeaway for me is the amount of learning we've done. But I would say like the highlight one for me is still the Andy Weir, author of The Martian, getting to do the podcast with him, because that was just a geek fame kind of moment. That was definitely a highlight. But I would say another one that we haven't done it in a number of years, and actually I probably should have checked because I don't even know if they did it this year, but the charity raises, we haven't done it in a couple of years, but the Krispy Kreme run, I think they're back to doing it again. I think they did it this year. We did not do it, but I mean, I want to say, you might know the more current number. It was like over 35,000 for charity from the listeners. Over the years. So that's really amazing. And that's something I would love for us to get back into.
We need to get back and do some stuff to give back. Absolutely. So the eating a dozen donuts, probably not good for our long-term health, but there are plenty of other things we can do with the community. And maybe we can find something that's, obviously we'd love to do stuff that's local, but maybe we'll do some stuff that's a little broader in scope too, that'll bring in a few more people. So anyways, well, listen, we used to have a really long tradition of having what we thought was just an absolute A-list guest on all of the 100 shows, 100, 200 and so forth. We drifted a little bit from that, I think, just because we sort of forgot about some of the milestones. This week is definitely a A-plus list guest. So I'll hold off on announcing who they are. We'll get to it after the break, but this is definitely one you're going to want to listen to. A complete rock star in your industry. Very excited to have him on the show. And Aaron, congratulations to you on 700, and congratulations to our audience on being part of 12 million. I think it's a big deal. So
absolutely, everyone, Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, we'll get to our guest right after the break. Today's episode of the Cloudcast is sponsored by Datadog. Bring speed and scale to your security organization. Datadog Cloud Security Platform delivers real-time threat detection and continuous configuration audits across applications, hosts, containers, and cloud infrastructure. Built on top of the observability platform, Datadog brings unprecedented integration between security and DevOps aligned to shared organizational goals. As a listener to the Cloudcast, you can sign up for a free 2-week trial to see for yourself how Datadog can elevate your cloud infrastructure security posture by visiting datadog.com/security-cloudcast. Sign up now and receive a free Datadog t-shirt. That's datadog.com/security-cloudcast.
Are you struggling to keep up with the demands of managing and securing identity in your distributed enterprise IT environment? You're not alone, but don't let it hold you back. With Strata's identity orchestration platform, you can secure all your apps on any cloud with any IDP, so your IT teams will never have to refactor for identity again. Imagine modernizing app identity in minutes instead of months, deploying passwordless on any tricky old app, and achieving business resilience with always-on identity, all from one lightweight and flexible platform. Want to see it in action? Share your identity challenge with us on a discovery call, and we'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cloudcast. That's strata.io/cloudcast.
And we're back. And, folks, we got a lot of really good feedback about the look-ahead shows, the shows that we do in January, sort of a big topic look-ahead shows. And one of the shows that we really wanted to do, but unfortunately due to just some scheduling stuff, people get busy and so forth, is we really wanted to dive into, what does a developer's world look like these days? There's so many things going on with developers, whether it's AI or mobile or microservices or serverless or just a million different things out there. And we've been wanting to do this show for a while. Not only that, we've been wanting to have this guest on for a while. So really, really excited to have James Governor, who is the co-founder of RedMonk. If you're a developer, you know James. If you're in infrastructure, you may not know him, but you really should. James, great to have you on the show. Really excited to finally have you on the Cloudcast.
Great. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, we've known you for a while. Aaron and I have both known you for a while. We get a chance to run into you from time to time at events. But for anybody who's maybe not familiar with RedMonk, all the good things that you and Steven and the whole crew amongst do, give us a little bit of background on RedMonk and kind of where you guys focus.
Yes, so we are a research and advisory company. We try and understand technology directions, and the way we do that is we really focus on practitioners, so software developers, ops practitioners. There are plenty of companies that do research from the perspective of really kind of a more purchasing-led view of the world, but our consulting and advisory is all about engineering-led technology adoption. So if we think about the patterns that have been underpinned the past couple of decades, open source, latterly the cloud, increasingly sort of the social side of things, platform like GitHub. We're really about understanding a world in which there's a bit less permission involved, often in decision-making in tech. And yeah, bottom-up adoption, that's what we understand. We spend a lot of time really just trying to understand, as I say, developers, the choices they make, developer culture, and helping others to understand that.
Yeah, no, and you guys have done an awesome job for many years. I've been lucky enough to be both a client, but also just to kind of see how you guys interact with the community. So very excited to have you on. We want to dive into just a bunch of developer-centric topics that I think people always have questions about. So as you guys look out, kind of take a broad view of things, how do you mentally sort of think about the different, do you think about developers as different tasks, the things they do? So a data scientist is different than a mobile developer. Do you think about kind of functionally what they do? Like how effective they are? Like how do you tend to think about when people say developers? Do you have sort of a mindset or a hierarchy of how you think about what they do or how they do things?
I don't know about a hierarchy, but obviously there are different kinds of developers. There are, any number of different ways that we could kind of delineate that or kind of come up with some kind of taxonomy. But yeah, not all developers have the same tasks ahead of them. And of course, to the point, we use developers as a bit of a shorthand. Certainly, data scientists would be one of the constituencies that we'd be trying to understand the decisions they're making and why. The one thing I would say is that we're probably at our best as a firm, and indeed, I think the industry moves forward, most effectively when things become a bit more general purpose. So, if we think about the mobile space, and this goes back a ways. But in the days when it was all Symbian and people developing everything in C and there's very specific no web technologies involved, I think that it had not really become a broad-based phenomenon that was relevant to all developers. If we look at mobile now, I mean obviously you still have specific languages for building mobile applications, but at the same time it's much closer to web development than it used to be.
Yeah.
And what we see is it's that we see a lot of leading indicators. We are always interested in kind of finding interesting technologies and individuals that are living in the future in order to understand that future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed in order to understand what some of the prospects are. But I wouldn't say we have a hierarchy. I mean, we are just as interested in the kinds of things that a developer working as software engineer working south of market at the coolest new highly funded startup is doing as honestly we'd be just as interested in the conversations we have with 45 50 55-year-old Java developers in enterprises that are thinking about, hang on a second, how do I take my skills modernize them, modernize the organization, modernize my applications. So I don't think we have a hierarchy, but we definitely have an understanding. Look, there are different kinds of folks. Not everybody wants to live and breathe it. People come from very different backgrounds. The rise of the sort of the boot camp developers, and some of them are so brilliant. And you certainly don't have to have, for example, a computer science degree to do great work. But all of these constituencies, we take an advocacy position about how do we bring more developers into the industry? How do we keep them here? How do we make a more welcoming industry and a better industry for everyone? So I think that definitely not a fan of gatekeeping.
Yep.
And I worry that, if this is the hierarchy, we might slip into that. So we just try and understand lots of different kinds of developers, lots of different kinds of folks. What are their incentives? What are their goals? What makes them tick? And it's that richness, I think, that keeps me going, that keeps the firm going, that gets us up every day excited to learn more about the industry and help the industry and our clients to understand that as well.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think so much of the headlines is some quote unquote rockstar developer out of Silicon Valley, but there's just as many folks, like you said, that are building amazing applications that are helping fishermen in Southeast Asia that just have a mobile phone or something. There's such a humongous variety. It's good to see that you guys are like, hey, we're trying to bring more people in. We're interested in all different ways people are doing it, and creative ideas come from all over the place.
Well, look, to your point, geographically, you take a geography like Nigeria, and obviously a lot of political issues happening there, the recent election, a lot of tension. But as a geography, it's just absolutely fascinating. It's a really significant population. Lots of young people, a lot of folks, in tech, and it's coming from all sides anymore. There's a lot more to this industry than Silicon Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, you've only got a finite amount of time in your day to focus on things. You've got different people coming at you. What are some of the trends that either you or just the broader team are sort of focused on these days to say, okay, how do we not only scratch the surface but have a deeper opinion on things? Do the sort of research that you do? What are if somebody said like, hey, what are your top 5 or 6 things that you're focused on? What might those be in 2023, or at least at this time?
Yeah, we've been focusing a lot on developer experience, which is perhaps obvious, but as a topic, it perhaps was not considered to be important to a lot of organizations. The idea that a bank would be concerned about developer experience not so long ago would have been absurd. Here we are in 2023, and it's very clear that more and more orgs are concerned about developer experience. How do they deliver it? We live in a world where there's this huge opportunity. I mentioned open source, cloud, the fact that there's so much code on GitHub and so on. I can go to NPM. There's libraries for everything. No need to ask for permission. That's great. But one of the things that happens, of course, is the developer then ends up pulling a bunch of things together, building something. And there is also an aspect of, oh, great. Okay, you built it. Now you can manage it. It's the classic, you build it, you run it, you break it, you fix it. Well, there are a lot of overheads, cognitive overheads associated with that. And I think we're now seeing sort of waves of, better developer experience. Now, we're seeing companies that are specifically funded to provide better developer experiences. We look at some of the companies that are sort of dominating, do extremely good work at the moment. Folks like Netlify or Vercel, they're all about understanding developer workflows, understanding that developer opinion, instantiating that in their platform, and making more and more people productive. So I think that, and now we're onto a whole new wave of tools. So just looking at organizations and their needs to support their developers, and then the companies and projects that are supporting that. I guess, related, I wrote a piece about this recently. I think one of the things that's very interesting in that regard is just a huge difference. Even in 2022, beginning of 2022, you might have been writing about developer experience and not really mentioning AI. Okay, we got sort of, Copilot in the periphery of our vision, but it wouldn't be central. End of 2022, beginning of 2023, and I think increasingly, AI, large language models, machine learning is coming to a developer experience near you, and that's going to be a transformative phenomenon in this industry for the for now and the near future.
Yeah.
I think another area would be cloud development environments and cloud developer environments. So for the longest time, I mean, certainly the notion of a browser-based IDE is not new. That's something that the industry has been kind of working on for at least 10 years. On the other hand, it does seem a little bit at the moment that we've got a bit of a sort of crossing the chasm phenomenon going on, where the advantages, if we think about the kinds of cloud-based services we're using, if we think about the fact that we're dealing with these immutable infrastructures, if we think about the fact that the tooling has just got better, so the ability to collapse that distinction. It's partly the distinction actually that we see between production and development, and really providing a better experience for people that is cloud based. I think it's very interesting, sort of thinking through the implications of a world in which CodeSpaces is effectively competing with Apple. Because on the one hand, you've got Apple creating these incredible, highly performant machines, thus encouraging the developers sort of, Mac huggers, against this idea of, hang on a second, I've got all of these services running in the cloud. I've got all these APIs running in the cloud. It makes a lot of sense for me to begin to break down the boundaries between local and cloud-based development. So I think that's a phenomenon that we're quite interested in. I talk a lot about progressive delivery. The rise of, underpinned by more effective automation, the fact that we've got this abundance of cloud, I can spin up 10,000 containers in a very short space of time. That's certainly a different world from the one that you and I grew up with, Brian and Aaron. I think that the sort of the abundance is there, that we can now do blue greens, A/B testing, feature flags much more effectively than we used to be able to do. And I think organizations thinking about, okay, we're doing and are building on those foundations of CI/CD and all of the great work that's there, but we can de-risk further, we can move faster. And so for me, I mean, progressive delivery, it's a term I came up with. Yep. It resonated with people. Redmonk usually doesn't invent terms, but that one seems to have resonated. So I'm spending a lot of time on that. I think the company as a whole, obviously there's a ton of interesting stuff happening around data and data architectures. We recently hired Dr. Kate Holteroff, and she's much more front-end oriented than we've seen in the company as a whole. We've tended to be more the back-end focus. She's bringing that front end. And then finally, I think tech comms, the importance of technical communications, getting better at it. Clearly, that has developer experience implications as well. And Kate and Dr. Kelly Fitzpatrick on the team are very, very much about the importance of education and technical communication in people becoming more effective in their jobs. So, yeah, those I think would be some of the topics that are front of mind for us. And then, all the usual stuff, the build out of Kubernetes, the rise of how do we abstract away from Kubernetes, platform engineering, supporting golden paths, and that sort of stuff. So I would say those would be some of the topics that we're interested in right now.
Yeah, no, good stuff. It's anything Yeah, all the work that is going on to simplify things for developers. And again, a lot of this really boils down to the thing you talked about before, right? There's so many people that potentially can be contributing as developers. The more we make it simple, the more pathways we give them, that they're not tied to their device. They can be using cloud services. They can be building their career because not only are they good in front of the keyboard, but they can communicate that to people. All those things are really, really important. I want to talk about something that I know you've dabbled in the past, and it kind of it's had a rocky life cycle. I feel like is this concept of platforms and platform as a service, and now there's sort of a concept of platform engineering. PaaS started off as this panacea. You were around in the Heroku days and Cloud Foundry days, and the idea of like one platform allowed developers to write their code. Everything else gets out of the way. It's kind of gone through fits and starts. We've seen some success. We've seen people kind of fall back and say, well, that one doesn't fit for all my different my languages. It doesn't fit for exactly how we do that. How do you see that sort of part of the developer experience? I know Adrian Cockcroft wrote a thing just a few weeks ago, sort of like his Netflix experience of platforms and platform engineering, where he sort of said, the mistake people make is they think there's going to be one platform, and the reality is there's all these sort of micro platforms for a type of job or a type of language or type of something. Do you have you sort of seen? Do you have any a viewpoint on where we are today with this idea of platforms for making developers' lives easier? Are we resigned to just having every language is going to have their own? Where do you sort of see PaaS having shaken out after 10 years or so of the industry trying to figure it out?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I have jokingly said in the past, the IT industry is just endlessly remaking remakes of Heroku. We live in an industry of implement, re-implement, rinse, repeat. And that's true in all sorts of areas. Where look at this thing. This is completely new. Virtualization. Meanwhile, mainframes have been doing it for like 30 years or whatever. It's sort of the packaging exercises that we go through. Containers was a subsystem that was absolutely there in Linux, but Docker had to package it up in a way to make it more consumable. Opinions are great, but they can make people productive. The platform can instantiate an opinion, but there is no one. I mean, if we think about Heroku and 12-factor, that went so well. People thinking through the way that they should be building applications in order to take advantage of sort of modern infrastructures. But the truth is that there's always edge cases, and what would I do? Go to Vodafone and say what you need to do is kick out the infrastructure you're building on top of Kubernetes and use Vercel for everything. That just wouldn't make any sense. I mean, as long as I've been in the industry, we've certainly had a difference between somewhat of a difference between transactional applications and the question of where state is managed, and then applications that are just more content sort of based. I think the truth is that there's never going to be one size fits all, any more than we're going to have one language that is the only programming language that everyone uses. I don't think we're going to have one platform that meets all opinions and workflows. I think one of the things I find interesting at the moment is about this platform engineering question, and as it meets the platform itself, is how could we have some sort of policy and let the organization curate different like flavors of the platform so that it is applicable in different areas. But no, I mean, look, it's 2023. The simple fact is that no platform is going to make everyone happy, and developers are going to go and find the thing that best suits the job that needs to be done. And so I think that it there's balance from infrastructure back to PaaS. We're seeing it now, the Kubernetes build out, and then everyone's like, hang on a minute, this is too complicated. We need to simplify this. You mentioned Cloud Foundry. Cloud Foundry was, very much hang on a second, how can we just take a step back and standardize some things? And I think that's where we are with Kubernetes. And so PaaS ideas are super helpful, but there is no one PaaS that is going to meet all development requirements.
Yeah. No, I think that's sort of shaken out in the market, and it's like you said, there's been plenty of companies who have tried to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes they've struggled, but then, like you said, there's been others like Vercel and and others who have just said, look, we're going to focus on one specific type of experience and be really good at that. And so the market is shaken out like you would expect it. You mentioned languages. RedMonk is famous for, I think it's twice a year now, you guys come out with your sort of language survey, rankings and so forth. It does feel like a little bit with the language space. It's always the same at the top. It's Java and Ruby, or Python, and the sort of the famous top 10, because there's so much code that's written, it's not going away. And then there's always one sort of new shiny thing. Maybe it's Rust or Go, or it is. What do you guys sort of get out of tracking the languages? Are there really big things that happen? Are you just trying to find that one outlier that might be something new that might be really useful for a use case? I mean, how do people tend to interpret all the analysis that you guys put together?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the beauties of our rankings is that they generate attention. We want to be part of that industry conversation, and they have the beauty of frankly appealing to the two fundamental forces in the universe, which are outrage and confirmation bias. So people are either angry at us because we didn't write about their widget, or they are extremely happy that we did. Obviously there's been such consistency at the sort of the top of the rankings. JavaScript continues to grow and sort of find new niches to populate those niches. I mean, in terms of that sort of survival of the fittest, which really means fitting into niches, JavaScript has just been phenomenal at that. For me, one interesting thing there is the rise of TypeScript, where I begin to wonder whether we'll have the top two rankings indeed will be JavaScript and then TypeScript. Is it possible that TypeScript overtakes Python? I believe it is. So I think that there is quite a lot of stability, and a language like Java is not going anywhere. But to your point, that you're always looking for, will the outliers become mainstream, and why might they? General purpose is so important. If you're not a general purpose language, highly unlikely you will. So a language like Go sort of exploded onto the scene. Clearly a huge amount of interest. It was associated with that Kubernetes wave. For systems programming, obviously Go was a language getting a lot of attention and adoption, but it didn't cross over as a general purpose language. I think at the moment we're seeing a lot of excitement around Rust. The industry as a whole is thinking about type safety, but certainly thinking about security, and Rust is getting a lot of attention, and in some weird and interesting use cases. Some more front end, certainly some more back end. But is Rust going to become? I mean, are we as popular as JavaScript? I think that's pretty unlikely. Yeah. To be frank, it has a huge amount of utility in those use cases that it's finding. But yeah, so I think some of that discussion around, and you asked about trends we're interested in, another one, if we think about this, that's sometimes called Edge, but the rise of sort of WASM and WASI, that's an interesting one, because on the one hand, everyone's like, it's polyglot, you can write any language and run it anywhere. Sounds great. But then there's another constituency is like, well, obviously you're going to be writing your edge workers in Rust. So I think that the debate goes on and on. What we see is organizations tend to grow explosively, but because the rankings are not noisy by design, they are accretive. They are looking at behaviors over time that we pull from Stack Overflow and GitHub, it's very rare that a language breaks into the top 4 or whatever. And in fact, that transition when finally Python seemed to sort of overtake Java, and the rankings are still quite a leading indicator. We don't have like telemetry across every enterprise on the planet and what they're using. That was a pretty interesting moment. There was another quarter when Java, or another half year when Java sort of came back. They were back at parity, but it does really seem like Python, and I think it's partly because it's so powerful for those data-driven applications, that data science kinds of applications, as well as those more general purpose use cases. So we're just, we're always interested in funky new stuff. It would be a pretty boring company if we only spent our time looking at Java and Spring and so on. But on the other hand, we have to be cognizant of, hang on a second, let's look at what is widely used by a wide range of people. So you want to be able to have a view on both.
Right. Exactly. Last question. I want to be conscious of your time. So, there are a million, I don't know, like threads and discussions and trends and so forth that is trying to figure out, not just technically, but culturally, how do we give developers flexibility? How do we enable developers to focus on writing code and not have to, not have to be burdened with a whole bunch of infrastructure or security stuff. So whether it's DevOps or SRE or platform engineering or any of those things, like how, as you talked, so you obviously talk to a lot of companies and people who are like, hey, we're in the DevOps space or we're in platform engineering. But when you talk to developers, how much of that do they look at and they go, I still just want to write code? I mean, do you find the majority of developers kind of don't care about that stuff? They're glad people are trying to make it simpler for them? Or do you feel like they're actively involved in these self-service activities or other things because they're like, well, I can't get away with just sort of writing code and throwing it over the wall anymore? Where do you see developers' view on that? Because we see a lot of infrastructure's view, but where do you see sort of the developers' view on these sort of overlapping trends, if you will?
Well, the answer is, of course, that it depends.
Yeah.
Some developers are very much, I just want to build the application. And, that's great. That is absolutely a good focus and approach to have. I just want to be able to build applications. That's what we're doing here. On the other hand, if you are web company, bank, telco, even a major retailer or whatever today, you're going to want some people that do care about both. So much whilst, oh my goodness, does every developer need to know about like Helm charts and YAML and everything else in building and deploying applications to run on Kubernetes? We certainly hope not. But on the other hand, if you don't have anyone in your organization that understands those things and something about the application logic as well, things are not going to be so awesome either. And I just think that at the moment, we're probably seeing a bit of a shift back to kind of specialization. We've spoken a lot about DevOps. I think this platform engineering phenomenon is a bit of an acceptance that actually there are some people that are ops oriented and they need a set of tools to do their job. Yes, they should be involved in the curation of experiences that developers like and love. But they're fundamentally actually different roles. So we need some of those, I don't know, for want of a better word, sort of T-shaped people, people that do want to get down in the weeds and build the apps. But no, there are, it would be doing a disservice to application developers everywhere to say, hey, you also need to know all of this stuff, which is honestly, it's not, I mean, look at Google, right? So Kubernetes came out of Google. It's based on a Borg, an internal project, or not an internal platform that Google has. Do we think that every developer at Google is contributing to Borg system internals? Absolutely not. You've got a platform team that does that. And then you've got, obviously, application teams in tons of different areas that will be taking advantage of that, but they don't need to know all the ins and outs. They need to know how to use it. They don't necessarily need to know how it works. And I think that's one of just the big, we are not all car mechanics. We drive cars. We don't need to know. We don't need to know how they work anymore. Right. And they're so complicated, we probably couldn't. If we think about the diagnostics in a modern car, which is basically a computer on an internal combustion engine, or ideally an electric, a battery and an electric drive shaft or whatever. We don't need to know how it works in order to use it. And I guess that would be the, in sum, we can't expect everyone to do everything. We should be focusing on getting the most out of our people, understanding sort of their needs, hiring accordingly, building sometimes cross-disciplinary teams, sometimes just deep single domain teams. I think that if I know anything, and I've learned anything in my time in the industry, is that one size does not fit all. So I think that let app developers build apps, and that was part of the beauty. I mean, you mentioned PaaS, but the beauty of that Rails wave, people were just so productive in building those applications, and there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah. Good stuff, James. Thank you so much for the time today. Learned a bunch. It's been we've been wanting to have you on the show for a very long time. It was great to finally do it. Folks, if you haven't had a chance to check out redmonk.com, all the links that are in the show notes, definitely go check out what all of them are doing. Really great insights on developer trends, on the interaction of all sorts of different types of applications that are getting built. Definitely a resource that Aaron and I use all the time. So, James, thank you again, folks. I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank him for his time. I want to thank you all for listening, for telling a friend. Had somebody reach out to me the other day and said, "Hey, man, I told 30 friends about the show." Well, we're thankful for you. We're thankful for you telling one friend. So, with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.